Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name is Clint Button and I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 121 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Let's back this up just a little bit and see if you can see. I went ahead and blocked off some of this stone. Just working away. Now, before anybody gets confused, I was doing this and I'm thinking, there's all this stuff that's just normal. I've been knocking this off, we marked it in with a saw, sawed them, stayed way up because this is the background. Realistically, I've probably got another inch or two, hopefully, there on everything before I'm even close to it. And we've got to still sink the joint down that way and drop this an inch. So, should be plenty good, just with eyeballing. But we've been pointing. Okay, we've been shooting points, right? And I talk about a point machine, and I talk about foundation points and job points and all this other stuff. Something I've mentioned, but I haven't really gotten into, is point marks. We talked about some when I was doing the base, because these red spots, these are points, okay? That white mark right there, that's a point mark. Completely different, okay? So, if you start mixing up the nomenclature, people aren't going to understand. Now, we try to avoid producing point marks like that on work because it shows, I don't know if lack of control is the right word, but we don't want there to be any stuns. This is where the crystals are crushed, okay? It's completely different than a point mark when we're shooting points. But this is considered to be a point mark. We want to be able to not produce stuff like that and be able to, if we do, we want to put them in a place where we could theoretically walk them off and get rid of them. Now see, this one that I just pounded in is way at the bottom. I can take a sharp point that I can work around it in such a way that I can hopefully get rid of the vast majority of it. And the way we do point marks when we have to point something, the way to avoid producing ones like this, you can sandblast them to get rid of them to a certain extent, but the best way to do it is to not put your tool in a hole. Always break above the bottom, because then you can go around it and you can knock off 90% of it or the whole thing. It just disappears. And you shouldn't have to clear them. Sometimes the way to deal with them is to take a bigger break or to break them into smaller pieces so that they're not as obvious. And you can have a point mark that just kind of disappears just by nature of where it is. And you don't have to do a lot to camouflage. But I don't think I've pointed out the difference between job points, foundation points, and point marks yet, all in the same context. But ideally, we're not going to have any of these white marks left on a job. And when we do shell rock, like I mentioned, the goal is to not have any point marks on it, to have no tool marks left, because this is indicative of a point. Okay? And there are ways to camouflage them, and I'll get into more of that later when we actually have to do it. But just thought I'd bring it up there. Keep on swinging points. One of the reasons I talked about how difficult a couple of these points were to find. And we could have swung from the far side, but it's really difficult to swing from the far side and clear stone and have it fit. And I don't know, it's easier sometimes, and that will take them out of plane where the circles will cross more obviously, as opposed to just meeting and having a tangent. But it's really hard to get to swing from a far point into a mass like this, because you're coming down and you don't always know where you're at, and you've got to be very careful about removing that stone. So, but this is just to get some big stone off here, move a couple 100 pounds of stone to get this off so I can work. I'm going to start working. I'll keep working up her body, just about to where this point is on her knee. We've got to work up and not do as much here until we get it better situated. But we'll, I'm gonna, when I shoot stuff like under her arm, she's standing with her arm folded across her chest. And when I shoot below her elbow, which is over in this area, I'm not gonna, for now, okay? I'm just gonna shoot the points that are on the surface. I'm not gonna cut away up to her elbow yet. Just like I'm not gonna cut away above her shoulder yet. I'm gonna leave a little bit of extra stone there for now until we stand her up and I get her put together well, and I understand that she looks good there, because she might look better with, a 1/4 inch of extra stone, extra mass below her elbow. Her elbow may need to be a little bit longer, or her shoulder may need to be in a different height. So, especially where she's going to be 5'7", it may look better once I get her put together. And I'll get the rest of it put together, and we'll just basically leave a lump of stone below her elbow, because we can clean that off anytime. And I'll start swinging some compasses. As I've developed more points in here, I went ahead and took some bulk off just to sort of start putting it together. Those are the lines, the folds, and let's see if I can point my fancy high-tech pointer. We're right in here. These are the rough lines. Now, this is all going to look kind of weird for quite a while, because all of these points that I've shot, like these are on top of a fold on the very outside high point, and in here they're the low point. So this has got a lot of material to evacuate in here to get rid of, to make these rise up to the top. And this goes back to some of the work I talked about before, where I said if you've got a low spot, you've got to lift it. You have to leave it. You have to get really good at lowering the area around a low spot in order to pick it up and make it high. And that's because that's what you're going to do. That's really a lot of what I'm going to do with carving this. Because this is on top, this is on top, and right now that's sunken way down in the bottom of the hole. And so we're going to clean this up. This is just roughed off. The benefit of putting it together some like this, just roughly, is that you've got a rough idea on where the shape and the form is inside the mass. And you've got to be able to understand that. So as you're moving forward, like I'll shoot some points up here, we'll get this off, we'll get up to where we're close to her, where we'll get to her arm, and then we'll shoot the top of her arm and the top of her cuff and her sleeve, but we won't cut the bottom off. We'll leave it just like I mentioned. So, but we'll get this put together, and then we'll be able to see it, and we'll leave this material extra like this. This is important too, as we're working this down here, where we're going to stretch her and add an inch, because we've got to, like, maybe the detail that normally would be right here would be moved over 1/4 inch, and down here that detail would be moved over 1/2 inch, and down here it's 3/4 inch in order to blend that 1 inch in. But that's going to have an impact on how that drapery flows. And so we want to get the bulk of the stone off where it's easy to service the stone while it's laying down like this, but we don't want to start cutting a lot of pendant drapery until we stand her up. And then we can take and use this extra mass to find the line that we need that makes sense in terms of gravity and her actual form. Because, you know, I got this one little low spot here that I think is going to basically disappear. I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. But and we made this seems to be deeper than it, but this has got to be a vertical wall. We'll stand this up and we'll get all that, and we'll get all the drapery justified, and we'll have to make sure that she is plumb, she's vertical, you know, in both planes. We'll square the joint, and when we stand this up, it'll be nice to still have a flat face on it. Then we can make it perfectly square, so we can stand her up so the drapery falls the way gravity would make the drapery fall. It's coming along. It's just tedious. This point isn't a fun, exciting thing to do. It's just kind of you get into the zone. So let's cut some more points. This is the big reason for trying to get a rough idea on where things need to be and roughing material off, you know, in general, is that now that I've got some of this bulked off, I understand where this contour is. It's real easy to take your caliper and, you know, follow it with a pencil to strike and see where you need to be, because I can come in from these different sides and swing and get an idea on where I need to work. I need to work stone off in here, because as this sinks, this line will advance quite a bit and this line will drop, but this one will pretty much be the one that catches up. This line will move and this line will move. We'll be in line with this dot point right here. And so it'll come over and probably meet more over in this area here. But this is why you start roughing it off as you can, just to get it off. And then you'll be able to achieve your points a lot faster. You got to be careful, because, you know, if you saw too deep, you remove material that you got to have. You know, one of the other sculptors on his website years ago called this the snowman stage, where everything just kind of puffed in and it'll look all big and puffy. But this is coming good, so I'll work this down. We get another point. This shows pretty good. I just put some lines. These are the original lines that I struck. See how far apart they are? There's one here, and then this one was up here. So if you can see, they were almost an inch apart, and now they're not even a quarter inch down there at the wide part. So this line won't change a lot. This one's advancing a lot. This one will probably not advance because it's pretty straight. So this one will stay about where it is. So our intersection is probably going to be right up in here, but we got to still go down enough to let this one over here, this point will advance. So we got to keep going. It won't advance forever, but that's where we're going. Keep cutting. Now it's getting quite a bit closer. See these two lines? These two strikes are coming together really well. So our cross is going to be right over in here. And because of the way it's on the side of her thigh, we want to leave bulk on top here so we don't dig anything out. So we'll chase this. I'll sink this just a little bit here. We'll slowly go. We know it's about in the same level as this point, so we know we're pretty close. This is a good time to point out, you may have to reconfigure the compasses so that they don't hit. That's the benefit of these beam compasses, is you can use a long one. This just barely clears right here. It may hit right there, so you may have to use a longer one to angle it back. This is really close. Let's do this a little bit more and check. this off just because you can see these two swipes superimposed. You hit right there, there's just a tiny gap. So we shoot that point, it'll be great. It'll fit perfect. Perfect fit. Perfect fit. Perfect fit. Now we'll do the next one. All right, I don't know if y'all will be able to see this, but I just wanted to strike this. And strike this. And I'll strike this end one. I'm going to pull the camera down. There's my strike. Okay, check this out. These opposing strikes from here and from down by her foot, superimposed perfectly. So, golden. No shoot point, right there on the cross, move on. All right, more humility and honesty here. Trying to show y'all how this actually works and not making it up. Now, when I shot these last few points, this one didn't make any sense, okay? I looked on that fold, I looked on this, and these should be in a line. And this one was too deep. And it didn't make any sense. And so I went back and double checked it and shot it again. This is why it's good to not hog off a lot of stone. I cut that in as shallow as I could to produce that point. And it's on the highest point there with, like, you know, there's probably going to be half an inch behind that point on the actual job. I went back and shot it, and this time I shot it from the opposite corners instead of this one to get a better pull. When you've got a lot of stone in the way, it's hard to do that in the beginning because you've got so much clearance issue that even with these, it's difficult to gauge where you got to go. And so until you get it opened up, that's what I keep saying, it's pretty treacherous. But this didn't make any sense, so I went back and shot it, and instead of that point being over here where I shot it the first time, it came out here. And this is pretty much right in line with that fold down to these. And if you look above, it's in line as well. And so that solves it. Because that is on top of a really tall fold. See, this is on this fold right here, and on the model, there's at least half an inch, if not more, deep right there, close to the 5/8. So we shouldn't have any issues with this. But this is why, as you put it together and you start to understand the form, you know, we may have the same kind of issue. This one seemed deep here too, and this may be a problem. You know we cut around this one. This point was an issue, but I cut too much here. But I think by the time we blend that, that's going to disappear. And this, we should be able to manage that one as well. But this one makes a lot more sense. And as you start to understand where a fold is, a line is, a detail is, you'll be able to chase it a lot faster because you know that this is going to be either in or out or up or down. And so you can get a pretty good idea on where the next step is to cut. Now see, I had to cut this top off because it was hitting the arm of my compass. So I couldn't reach down to hit this point at the end, so I had to trim that off. But this is reality. I mean, I could never tell you this. I could just, we could do the time lapse and run around like a cartoon character and looking all stupid and stuff's flying over my shoulder and whatever. And the stone just gets smaller and smaller. And I never explain these things to you. You have to be able to stop and say, that doesn't look right. And until I did this, I wasn't sure. I thought that seemed deeper than what it needed to be. But I measured and I double checked my compasses and whatever. And for whatever reason, I didn't do it just right. I shot this better. And this, I think, is more of a function of these 3 points. One foundation point on the end, one foundation point on the end, and the job point, all being pretty much in a straight line and giving me that really difficult to read long, straight, and probably this measurement was just a little bit long, and it pushed it over, because if you have a little error when you measure, especially on the model, and you enlarge it, it creates real problems. And that would be my guess, was that this dimension that I captured and enlarged was probably just a tiny bit too long. So instead of these meeting here, it all met up here. But now, something I expect that y'all are getting frustrated, because this is taking forever. It takes a long time to point. This is why we don't point stuff in general. We generally just carve it direct. The way I would normally carve this job and get all the stuff off the stone is I'd make what's called a full-size drawing of this job. And let me hang this camera up and I'll explain that. Okay, if I had, I'll have to get some out. This is more related to direct carving. But normally what we would do is we would work from an approved full-size drawing. You get a full size, and if you get a full size from a professional artist, that's in the business, it'll just be a line drawing. They're not going to do all the shading. They're not going to put shadows. They're not going to draw every hair on the head and try to make and draw eyelashes and things that you can never carve in granite. Okay, you want to create shadows. I can't carve them. This isn't like bronze where we can just, put a little bit of patina there and burn it a little bit more, and it makes a shadow so things stand out and things subdue. We have to create the three-dimensional surface that produces those shadows. And that's the big difference between this and work that has a coloring agent to it. We have to create everything by the actual surface contour and texture. But with this, if I was frustrated right now, I said, look, I'm sick of pointing. I take this and I do a full-size drawing, whether I took a photograph of her and scaled it up on a grid, drew it by hand, took a photograph and printed it out, went down to the local copy shop and said, hey, I want this to be exactly this tall, and have a big piece of paper. I'd lay that piece of paper on there and I'd take not this, I take something for, and I'd take, and I'd take a bunch of holes through the paper just to mark the face of the stone. And I'd draw a few lines on there to connect those dots, and I'd just carve it. And that's how we do most of this work when we're laying, we've got a full-size drawing. And you just lay it on the stone and mark it out and just carve it, just by eye. Until you're good enough to do that, it doesn't always turn out well. So pointing gives you a chance to start to learn where things are in the stone so that you can actually do that and succeed. But I don't know. Pretty happy with the way it's going. It's just slow. And anytime you find an error or a mistake, fix it. Because nobody else is going to fix it. This isn't going to heal. This isn't going to grow back stone. Right here where I went a little bit, I was, that point's, not quite 3/4 of an inch where it should be, but I've got enough room there. That's part of choosing your points carefully, where you shoot them. Okay. Remember how I showed you on these point marks. Okay. You don't put your point when you're breaking stuff off. You don't go down in the bottom of the hole and start flogging on it. go on the top of it and break off to that hole. Leave your point marks on the top so you can pick them off and clean them up and make them disappear. And it looks like you're more professional because you produce a stone that doesn't have any tool marks on it. Okay? I chose points along the tops of these folds on the highest points that I could possibly find to give me the amount of insurance I need in case I have something happen. And I can't tell you everything that happens. I mean, I did it, it's my fault. There's nobody else to blame for it. But for some reason, you know, I was thinking too hard and I thought that way instead of this way. And so when I had a better opportunity to evaluate it, now I can see that this one doesn't make any sense because it's depressed. I've got to fix it. It isn't going to just miraculously get better. And this is where experience and patience and doing it right and trusting the method. You got to develop your judgment, your ability to perceive what something is. Just as much, you've got to develop the ability to go zip, zip, and you just sharpen a chisel on the stone, you put it away. You know, sit there and hack on that chisel for a 1/4 inch of carbide and burn up a whole chisel just trying to sharpen it. You need to just do a couple of swipes and make sure the bevel's good, and that's it. You're done. So same thing with this. But now I can look at it, and these points are right in the line they need to be, which is just awesome. And they're in the line this way that they need to be, which is just awesome. And, you know, that's cool. So understand that you're going to make mistakes. This is all about doing the best you can. And you're going to learn you should have quit about 3 hits ago on a lot of jobs, okay? Because you're going to be tempted to just keep going. Oh, I can make her prettier. Oh, I can make him look stronger. Next thing you know, now he's got no teeth. Now she looks all hollow-eyed. You know, she looks like she's 80 instead of 17 because you got a line cut around the top of the eye. And you see fat loss like that in older adults that are really thin. You don't see that in young, healthy people. They tend to have very voluminous, very puffy, fatty tissues around a pretty face. I mean, pretty faces on females typically are very fleshy and almost to the point of being plump. And so when you surrender that volume and you define that eye by cutting that line and you just aged her by 30 or 40 years, you can't put it back, babe. It's done. So you just have to say, yeah, that's one of my jobs, that's my portfolio, and then you just move on to the next one and try to make sure you don't do that again. So, like I said, I'm not Superman. I'm trying to understand this and do a good job and show you everything, not just show you the easy parts, you know, and have a big flourish and be all cool. I'm trying to show you the truth, man, because this is the truth. The stone ain't going to lie for me. I can lie all I want. A stone won't. It'll just tell the truth. So I'm going to do my best to tell you all the truth as well. But pretty excited that I figured that out. That makes more sense. Now that leg will come together much better, and we're going to work slowly up here. I'll probably move up before I take too much more of this mass off because her elbow is right in this area, if I'm not mistaken. I got to do some pointing, but this point here is below her sleeve. Her sleeve should be up in this area. This should be her elbow. And so I may take a little more off here, but I want to leave a little bit on the bottom of that sleeve and a little bit underneath that arm until I get her really put together, and I know that's where I want that arm to be. Because if I make her elbow short, I got to make her other elbow short, or she's going to look like she's a weirdo. Okay, like she's deformed. And y'all are going to see that because you know how to look at people. You know how to see that, she's got really long legs, or he's got really stumpy arms. And it just doesn't, it isn't that it's wrong, it's just not the most appealing concept because we're trying to create something that conveys beauty and peace. And that typically meets some typical standards that society has. So if she's got little stumpy short arms, it's going to look weird. And if we do that, that's why I'd cut that die on the other side, I got to make that other arm just as stumpy so they match. So she looks like, you know, she's just a girl that's got different shaped arms, but they're both the same. One's not 4 inches longer than the other. Does that make sense? All right, we'll wrap this video up. My name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with a Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.